The courtroom was silent for one sharp moment before the gavel dropped like a thunderclap. Gasps filled the chamber. A mother screamed and collapsed to her knees, clawing at the wooden floor as guards rushed to restrain her. Reporters shoved forward, their flashes illuminating her anguish. On the stand, 17-year-old Michael Carter stood frozen. He didn't cry. He didn't flinch. He simply stared, hollow and cold, at the floor beneath him. The judge's voice echoed, delivering a sentence that felt more like a blow than a verdict. Life without parole. No retrial. No second chance. Only stillness followed. Then Michael whispered something under his breath as the cuffs snapped closed. A camera flash caught the moment his head tilted toward the crowd, his lips barely moving. He said it again as they led him away. Michael said this wasn't justice. This was revenge. And with that he was gone, swallowed by the same system that chewed through truth and spat out ruin. Michael Carter was just 17 the day the state decided he'd die in prison. He wasn't a thug. He wasn't some gang kid. He was a straight-A student who worked 2 jobs, played varsity track, and took care of his mother when her lupus flared up. His school counselor once told him he could make it to Stanford. But the night someone got killed at a party he never even wanted to attend, all of that vanished. They called him a suspect. Then, a killer. The evidence was flimsy, confused witness statements, a dropped jacket that didn't even fit him, and a timeline that barely held together. But it didn't matter. The press needed a villain. The police needed a win. And the court needed to look decisive. Michael barely got to speak before the verdict came down. No one asked why he was there. No one questioned who really pulled the trigger. No one cared that the boy they locked away had never even held a gun. Janelle Carter had raised her son alone since the day his father disappeared into the wind. Life wasn't easy. Rent came late, pills cost more than food, and some nights they shared ramen and prayer. But she never let Michael see her break. She raised him to believe in books, not fists. In justice, not vengeance. But when she sat in that courtroom and heard the word guilty, something inside her shattered. It wasn't just that they convicted her boy, it was that they erased him. As if everything he'd done, everything he was, never mattered. Her neighbors offered pity. Her pastor told her to accept God's will. But all she could hear was the clink of chains. All she could see was that cold, distant look in her son's eyes. That wasn't justice. That was the state discarding a life like trash. The night Michael was taken, the house fell into stillness. His room remained untouched, bed neatly made, textbooks in a pile, a calendar with college application deadlines circled in red. Janelle wandered from room to room, touching his shirts, straightening papers, hoping it was all a nightmare. Outside, the world moved on. No vigils. No protests. Just whispers at the corner store and pitying glances from the neighbors. She felt invisible, powerless, but not broken. Not yet. Every evening, she waited by the phone for his call. And when it came, she listened to his voice carefully, memorizing the cadence, the pauses. Michael said, "I'm still here, Mom." But not for long. And in that silence after he hung up, Janelle decided one thing. She would not let her son disappear without a fight. The next morning, Janelle woke before sunrise. She brewed coffee she wouldn't drink, sat at the kitchen table, and began writing letters. To lawyers. To journalists. To anyone who might listen. At first her hands shook. But as the pen scratched paper, her movements steadied. She wrote of injustice, of missing evidence, of a good boy cast as a criminal. No one answered at first. Some envelopes came back unopened. But she kept writing. And when the silence grew heavy, she screamed into it. She started gathering case files, trial transcripts, even police reports she had to fight to see. The world had closed the book on Michael. But she was going to rewrite it, one letter, one breath, one flame at a time. Janelle started where the nightmare began, at the house where the party had been held. The front yard was quiet now, the music long gone, the kids scattered back to their normal lives. She stood on the lawn and stared at the cracked sidewalk where the body had been found. Neighbors peeked through curtains but didn't open their doors. She knocked anyway. Most said they didn't see anything. One older man muttered something about too many kids, too much noise. No one mentioned Michael by name. But one girl finally stepped out. Elena, no more than 16, hair tied back, eyes sunken. She spoke barely above a whisper. Elena said Michael didn't do it. He wasn't even near the body when it happened. He tried to help. He saw who did. Then she looked over her shoulder and whispered, "They told me to shut up." Then she was gone. Door locked behind her. Blinds drawn like a signal that truth wasn't welcome here anymore. Janelle's breath caught the moment Elena whispered those words. It wasn't just the message. It was the fear. That kind of fear doesn't come from guilt. It comes from power. Someone had silenced that girl, and Janelle knew what that meant. She took out her phone and tried recording everything she could remember. Details, faces, fragments. She scoured old social media posts from that night, anything tagged at the party. Most had been deleted. Some accounts were wiped clean. The few blurry images she found showed Michael in the corner, far from the crowd. She printed them anyway. Drew red circles. Connected lines. The more she looked, the more she saw how carefully the truth had been erased. Not just ignored, removed. Someone wanted this buried. Not for justice. For protection. She didn't know who yet. But she knew one thing for sure, Michael wasn't the only person the system had failed. He was just the one who'd been sacrificed. Elena vanished 2 days later. Her parents said she moved in with a cousin out of town. No forwarding address. No phone. The number Janelle had went straight to voicemail, then disconnected. She drove to the school but Elena wasn't on the roster anymore. Vanished like vapor. It chilled Janelle, in a way nothing else had. Someone had eyes on this case. Someone who made girls disappear and evidence vanish. She stood outside the school parking lot, staring at the faded bench where they used to sit before class. She pictured Elena's scared face, and Michael's quiet voice from his last letter. "I'm still here, Mom." But not for long. The phrase looped in her head like a warning. Janelle knew what fear looked like. She had lived it. But now she tasted something different. Rage. Not blind, not wild. Focused. Calculated. She didn't just want to prove Michael was innocent anymore. She wanted to know who had taken everything from him. And why. The lawyer didn't want to see her. He was polite but tired, papers stacked all over his cluttered office, sleeves rolled, eyes weary. He had 100 cases, no staff, and barely any hope. Janelle brought her photos, her recordings, her timelines. He listened but didn't look convinced. He said the appeals board already ruled. The system had moved on. You should too. But Janelle refused to leave. She said someone made a girl disappear. They buried a camera. The timeline's wrong. You know it. He sighed, leaned back in his chair and rubbed his temples. He said it's not about truth. It's about what's provable. Janelle said, then help me prove it. He looked at her for a long moment, saw the desperation, the steel, and then he pulled a file out of his drawer, said quietly, "This never made it into evidence, but it should have." And just like that, something cracked. Not the system, but the silence. That night, Janelle spread out the file on her kitchen table like it was a battlefield map. Witness lists, evidence logs, internal memos with things blacked out. She saw the name, camera footage, cross-street business. Listed. Ignored. No record of it entered into court. She found the business in public records. It had changed hands, but the address was the same. Her fingers trembled as she copied down the name. Then she went back to the file. One name jumped out. The boy who'd thrown the party. Nephew of the district attorney. Protected. Untouched. Unmentioned. Michael had written about someone whispering threats in his cell block. He said, "They want me quiet." The pieces finally started to arrange themselves. This wasn't sloppy prosecution. It was deliberate. And someone high up had made sure that truth stayed hidden. But now, Janelle had a direction. The game wasn't over. It had just started. Janelle didn't sleep. She drove across town before sunrise, the sky still purple and hushed. The building was a tired corner shop now, the kind that sold off-brand snacks and lottery tickets. But the address matched. She asked the clerk about the old security system. He shrugged, barely looked up. She pushed harder, mentioned the date, the night, the murder. His eyes flickered. He said he wasn't there then, didn't know anything. But Janelle saw the lie sit in his throat like a stone. As she turned to leave, an older man behind the counter called her back, said quietly, "That footage is long gone. They came for it before the trial." She turned. "Who?" He didn't say, just pointed behind the building. "There's someone you should talk to. A kid who used to work here. Used to run the cameras. Lives around the corner." Janelle nodded once and walked out, the weight in her chest shifting from dread to purpose. He was older now, maybe 24, hoodie pulled tight, cautious eyes. When Janelle knocked, he didn't answer at first. But something in her voice, tired, honest, relentless, must have reached him. He opened the door a crack. She said her son was in prison for something he didn't do. She said the camera was there. He sighed, looked over his shoulder, then opened the door all the way. Inside, the apartment was dim, cluttered with electronics and dusty cables. He said he remembered that night. Said he'd been told to erase the footage. But he didn't. He backed it up. Stored it. Then forgot about it until the story hit the news. He paused, then pulled out a small external hard drive. Said if your kid didn't do it, this might prove it. Janelle didn't breathe until the drive touched her hand. It felt heavier than it should have. Like it carried the truth inside it. Because it did. She couldn't watch it alone. Not the first time. She brought the drive to the lawyer's office and sat across from him, heart pounding, palms sweating. He clicked it open. Clicked the folder. Found the date. The file. And there it was, grainy but clear. Michael standing near the front gate. People shouting inside. Then, a commotion. A blur of movement. And not Michael, but another boy. White. Dot. Same age. Dot wall. Same build. Swinging something heavy. The victim collapsed. Michael ran toward them. He tried to help. That much was obvious. The camera never blinked. It caught it all. The lawyer sat back in silence. He said, "That's not your son. And that's not in any of the evidence logs." Janelle just nodded. She couldn't speak. Because there it was. The truth. Hidden in a file no one wanted found. And suddenly, all the nights she spent writing letters and praying into silence, it all led to this moment. Proof. Janelle stared at the paused frame. She pointed to the boy in it. Said, "Who is that?" The lawyer hesitated. Then clicked through old files, dug through court transcripts. Finally, a name. Ryan Keller. Nephew of the district attorney. A promising student, clean record, disappeared shortly after the trial. Janelle whispered they protected him. The lawyer nodded. Said quietly, "They framed your son to save theirs." Her stomach turned. Everything made sense now. The rushed case, the buried footage, the disappearing witness. Janelle felt the fury settle deep in her bones. Not the wild, helpless kind. The cold building kind. She said, "I want him found." The lawyer said if he's still in the country, someone knows where. Janelle leaned back, eyes sharp, voice low. "Then let's make sure they talk." For the first time, the system didn't feel untouchable. It felt scared. Because now, she wasn't asking. She was hunting. The next days moved like thunder. Janelle leaked a frame of the footage to an independent reporter, then another to a community organizer. A whisper campaign started. People began asking questions. Online forums exploded. The DA's office issued a vague denial, but the footage was too real. It spread faster than they could stop it. Parents started sharing it. Teachers, former students who remembered Ryan Keller. Then someone sent her an anonymous email. Subject line, "You're right. Body. He changed his name. I know where he is." She clicked it. An address. A new identity. And a photo. It was him. Older now, hair grown out, but the same jawline, same eyes. Her heart stopped. Not from fear. From confirmation. The boy who ruined her son's life wasn't missing. He was protected. Hidden. Rebranded. But not for long. Because Janelle had names now. She had proof. And she had nothing left to lose. Janelle didn't knock this time. She walked straight into the courthouse lobby, head high, eyes sharp. In her bag was a USB drive, the footage, and a thick folder of evidence. She demanded a meeting with the judge. The clerk said she'd need an appointment. Janelle said, "Then you better clear the calendar." The old her would have waited. This version didn't have time for gatekeepers. Within the hour, she was inside a conference room. The judge, a new one, younger, weary-eyed, listened as she laid everything on the table. The footage, the reports, the suppressed evidence. He didn't speak for a long time. Then finally he said, "If this is real, it's not just wrongful conviction. It's obstruction. It's criminal." Janelle nodded. Said, "It's revenge." The judge looked away, fingers drumming the table. He said, "This goes up the chain. Way up. And you're going to get pushback." Janelle met his eyes. Said, "I've been pushed back enough. Now I push back." The next morning, the DA held a press conference. He stood in front of the county seal, face stiff, voice calm. Said, "There's been a misunderstanding." Said, "We're reviewing new information." Said, "All appropriate channels are being followed." But outside that chamber, the storm was rising. Protesters held signs with Michael's name. College students marched with screenshots from the footage. Reporters dug into Ryan Keller's sealed records. Whispers turned to headlines. One bold journalist asked, "Was your nephew ever questioned?" The DA's smile cracked for a second. He said no comment. But the damage was done. Inside the office, staffers panicked. Emails flew. Phones rang. Janelle watched it all from her living room, arms crossed, her face unmoved. She didn't celebrate. Not yet. Because the system was wounded, but not broken. And wounded animals are dangerous. Janelle met with a journalist in a quiet diner on the edge of the city. The woman, sharp, mid-30s, notepad ready, asked hard questions. "How did you get the footage? Who gave you the name?" Janelle answered what she could, withheld what she had to. She said, "What matters is that my son didn't do it. That he was framed. That they all knew." The journalist nodded, chewing her pen cap. Then she slid over a small recorder. Said, "We have sources inside the DA's office. Someone's talking." Janelle leaned in. The voice was muffled but clear enough. "We buried the tape. We didn't want to risk the election. We thought it wouldn't come out." Janelle closed her eyes. There it was. The confession. Not from the DA, but from his aide. Still, it was enough. More than enough. The reporter said, "This story's going national." Janelle opened her eyes. Said, "Good. Let them all watch." By the end of the week, the leak exploded. Full internal emails published. Transcripts from closed-door meetings. A timeline showing deliberate suppression. The public turned. Outrage spread through city halls and classrooms. Talk shows dissected every second of the footage. The DA stopped appearing in public. Ryan Keller was nowhere to be found. And then came the moment Janelle never thought she'd see. A court order. A rehearing. Michael would be brought back to court. This time not to be judged, but to be heard. When she got the call, she didn't cry. She sat down, held the receiver in silence, then whispered, "Thank you," under her breath. Not to the judge, not to the state, but to herself. For not giving up. For pushing when everyone else let go. She folded the letter carefully, pressed it to her chest, and whispered, "Michael, they're going to see you now." The day of the hearing, the courtroom felt different. Not colder, not kinder, just sharper, brighter, timed, packed. Reporters filled the back. Michael entered in handcuffs, but his posture was tall. He scanned the room, saw his mother, and something flickered behind his eyes. Not relief, not hope. Recognition. He was seen. This time, the footage played on the big screen. Jaws clenched. The judge leaned forward. No one interrupted. The evidence spoke. When it ended, the prosecutor's seat was empty. The DA had resigned 2 days before. The judge turned to Michael and said, "We failed you." Then to the court, "This case is vacated." Janelle didn't sob. She didn't scream. She just closed her eyes and exhaled. The chains hadn't fallen yet, but the key had turned. As the crowd murmured, Michael turned to the judge and said, "I still remember the silence." The judge said, "Today, it ends." Michael sat in the holding room behind the courtroom, waiting to be processed for release. A metal bench, blank walls, buzzing lights. But in his hands was something new. A letter from his mother. He held it like it might break. The guard outside the door said 10 more minutes. Michael didn't speak. He just stared at the paper, unread, trembling slightly. He hadn't let himself hope in years. He didn't know what life outside would feel like. Couldn't picture a streetlight, a morning without bars, a meal without fear. In the letter, Janelle had written one thing, over and over. "I never stopped. I never stopped. I never stopped." He blinked, swallowed, and folded it carefully. No tears. Just breath. Then the door clicked. The guard said, "Let's go." And as Michael stood, cuffed one last time, he whispered, not to the guard, not even to himself, but to the silence that had been his companion all those years, "It's over." Outside the courthouse, the crowd waited. News vans, protesters, strangers holding signs with Michael's name. And there, in the center, Janelle stood still. She wore her best blouse, wrinkled but clean. Her hands trembled at her sides. The doors opened. The murmur rose. And then finally, Michael emerged, flanked by deputies. The cuffs were gone. He walked slowly, blinking into the daylight. The cheers began. Reporters surged forward. Cameras snapped. Janelle didn't move. Until he saw her. Michael froze. And for a long second they just stared. Time stretched. 1. The sound dropped out. Then, like gravity broke, he walked toward her. She opened her arms. He collapsed into them, not crying, not speaking, just there. Whole. Oil. Home. The cameras caught it. But that moment wasn't for them. It was theirs. A reunion written in years of silence and faith. He held her tighter than the chains had ever held him. They didn't speak much in the car. Janelle drove slowly, one hand on the wheel, one gripping the edge of her seat. Michael stared out the window. Every red light, every street sign, every pedestrian felt surreal. At one point he asked if the diner on 10th still made sweet potato pie. Janelle smiled, said still the best in the city. He nodded but didn't smile back. His face stayed distant, heavy. They pulled into the driveway. The house hadn't changed, but the neighborhood had. More fences. More silence. Michael stepped out slowly, walking up the path like it might disappear beneath him. Inside, Everything was exactly as he left it. His room, his shoes, the photo on the wall. He reached out and touched it. Janelle stood behind him, her voice quiet. "We never moved anything." He nodded, said, "I know." Then he sat on the bed and stared at the wall for a long, long time. The media wanted interviews. The city council wanted statements. Activists called for panels, fundraisers, a parade. Janelle declined them all. Michael wasn't ready. She wasn't either. They went to the graveyard first. No cameras. No crowd. Just them. Michael stood over his best friend's grave, the one whose death started everything. The headstone was simple. He didn't speak. He just knelt. Janelle stood a few feet back, arms folded. After a long silence, Michael whispered, "I should have said something. I thought silence was safer." Janelle stepped closer. "Said you were a child. They made you believe that." He shook his head. Said, "I watched them bury him. And I buried the truth with him." She didn't argue. Just placed a hand on his shoulder. The wind moved through the trees like breath. The sun fell slowly behind the trees. And for the first time in 7 years, Michael cried. That night, the lights in the house stayed off. Michael sat at the kitchen table, fingers tracing the wood grain. Janelle moved quietly, making tea. No music. No TV. Just the hum of the fridge and the soft clink of cups. He said they stole everything. She said not everything. "You're still here." He shook his head. Said, "I don't even know who I am anymore." Janelle sat across from him, her eyes clear. "You're my son. You're the boy who helped me walk when my legs gave out. The one who learned to cook because I couldn't stand long enough. The one who wanted Stanford." Michael looked down. Then met her gaze. Said softly, "I still want that." Janelle smiled, her eyes wet. "Then go get it. No one's stopping you now." He nodded once, slow. The night held quiet. But in the quiet, there was breath. And in the breath, a future. Michael didn't leave the house for days. Not out of fear. Not entirely. But because the world outside felt foreign. He stayed in his room mostly, reading the old books on his shelf. Classics sat prep guides, his own handwritten notes in the margins. Pages written by someone who believed in tomorrow. He stood at the window a lot. Watching. Listening. The wind in the trees sounded different. He kept a journal now, a gift from Janelle. The first page just said, "Start somewhere." So he wrote. Just a little each day. Things he remembered. Things he didn't want to. What silence felt like. What rage did to your breath. What forgiveness costs. Some nights, he stared at a blank page until dawn. But he didn't stop. Because even though prison had stolen years, it hadn't taken everything. Somewhere beneath the weight of injustice, Michael was still there. And he was beginning, slowly, to find himself again. Janelle returned to work at the hospital part-time. Bills hadn't stopped piling up just because the world noticed her son. Her coworkers welcomed her back quietly. Some with hugs, others with lowered eyes. But she walked the halls with dignity. She was no longer the woman everyone pitied. She was the one who fought and won. Still, in break rooms and long shifts, she carried the weight of it all. The system hadn't apologized. The city hadn't paid. There was no settlement. No justice really, just freedom. One night, as she folded towels in the linen room, a younger nurse said, "You're that mom, right? The one from the news." Janelle nodded. The girl smiled. Said, "You give people hope." Janelle didn't answer right away. Then she said, "Hope is good, but change is better." And she folded the last towel like she folded everyone, tight, even, and ready for what comes next. The media kept knocking. New networks. Podcasts. Documentaries. Janelle turned them all down, until one interviewer asked if Michael could speak for himself. She left the choice to him. At first he refused. I said they don't want truth. They want tragedy. But later he changed his mind. He sat in a bare room, camera rolling, the mic catching every breath. The interviewer asked, "What would you say to the people who believed you were guilty?" Michael didn't flinch. He said, "I don't need their belief. I needed their questions." The room went still. He talked about silence, about how no one listened when they should have, about being buried before you've even lived. When the interview aired, people cried, people raged. But Michael didn't watch it. He went for a walk instead. The world had heard his voice now. That was enough. The rest, he was still learning how to reclaim. Ryan Keller was found, living under a different name in another state, working at a tech startup. When the footage surfaced, he resigned quietly. No arrest. No charges, yet. The system moved slowly, deliberately. But for once, it moved. Janelle watched it unfold without satisfaction. She didn't want revenge. She wanted accountability. When the investigator called her to testify in a grand jury, she didn't hesitate. She brought copies of everything. Emails, footage, testimony. She walked into that chamber not as a grieving mother, but as a witness. When asked what she wanted from the process, she said, "Justice is a beginning, not an ending." People nodded, wrote it down, but she didn't care about sound bites. She cared that the truth, her truth, was now part of the record. The cover-up was unraveling, one knot at a time, and for the first time in years, the story was being told right. Michael applied to college again. Same schools, same essays, but this time the words hit different. His application didn't hide the prison years, it led with them. Not because he was proud, but because he wasn't ashamed anymore. One of the prompts asked, "What challenges have shaped your journey?" He wrote about silence, about fighting to be seen, about watching the world through a 6-inch window. He didn't beg for acceptance. He demanded a seat. A few months later, the letter came. Stanford. Admitted. Full scholarship. Janelle opened it before he did, then handed it to him without a word. He read it, silent. Then again. Then once more. Finally, he looked up and said, "They said yes." Janelle smiled. Said, "Of course they did. You never stopped being the boy who earned it." Michael sat back, letter in hand, eyes glassy. For the first time in forever, he let himself believe in tomorrow. The Stanford campus was alive with movement. Students rushed between buildings, books in hand, earbuds in place. Michael stood alone on a path under tall trees, his acceptance letter folded in his coat pocket. He watched them, unsure if he belonged among them. Then from across the quad, a voice called out, "Michael." A young man in a red hoodie jogged over. He introduced himself as a senior. Said he'd read Michael's interview. Said it was the realest thing I've ever heard. They talked. About classes. About late-night study sessions. About rebuilding. The senior said, "You'll find your rhythm here. Trust it." Michael nodded. It wasn't a promise, but it was a start. Later, walking alone past the library, Michael looked up at the old stone and glass. For the first time, he didn't feel like a visitor. He felt like a student. The world had taken his voice, but now he would use it. Michael's first class was criminal justice reform. He didn't choose it to make a statement. He chose it because he needed to understand the thing that almost ended him. The professor, mid-50s, sharp, skeptical, asked the class to define justice. Hands rose. Words spilled. Fairness, law, equality. Michael sat still. Then, finally said, "Justice isn't blind. It's expensive." The room went quiet. The professor turned. Said, "Would you care to elaborate?" Michael stood. Not shaking. Not unsure. And for 5 minutes he told them. About prosecutors who bury evidence. judges who ignore truth, public defenders with too many names and too little time. About silence as survival. When he finished, no one clapped. No one spoke. The professor simply said, "Class dismissed." Michael gathered his books and walked out. Outside, the air felt lighter. He didn't need applause. He needed impact. And he had just delivered it. Back home, Janelle visited the church for the first time in years. She sat in the back pew, hands folded, head bowed, not in surrender, but in reflection. The stained glass flickered with colored light. The choir hummed low. After service, the pastor approached quietly. He said, "I owe you an apology. I told you to let go." Janelle looked up and smiled gently. "Said you weren't wrong. But I was right not to." He nodded, humbled. Outside, the sky was soft with overcast clouds. A few women hugged her. A boy about Michael's age asked if she really got her son out of prison. She nodded. He asked how. Janelle didn't give a speech. She just said, "I didn't stop." Then she left, coat wrapped tight, walking back into a world still spinning, still hard, but now different. Because she had changed it. And somewhere inside, peace had found its place again. Michael sat outside the courthouse. Not the one from his trial. A new one. A boy about his age was being arraigned inside. Same handcuffs. Same slumped posture. Same silence in the face of power. Michael watched from the steps, dressed simply, backpack over one shoulder. He didn't move. Just observed. A reporter walked by, recognized him, asked for a comment. Michael declined. He wasn't here for headlines. He was here because cycles repeat unless someone breaks them. He watched the boy's mother pace outside the doors. Saw her eyes, same fire, same fear. She caught his gaze. He nodded once. Just enough to say, "I see you." Then he stood, turned toward the street. The boy inside had a journey ahead. Michael couldn't walk it for him. But he could clear the path. And that was what mattered now. Not just surviving the system, but changing it. The final shot. Michael stands at the edge of the courthouse plaza, framed against stone columns and gray sky. He's older now. Not just in face, but in presence. He glances toward the camera, gaze steady. Inside, another case begins. Another name. Another fight. Michael doesn't flinch. He steps forward, then stops. He turns. Looks straight ahead. He speaks, not to the crowd, not to the press, but to the audience watching. Michael says justice isn't blind. It's just expensive. Then he walks out of frame. The doors slam behind him. The screen fades to black. For a moment, only silence. Then a single sound, the gavel, followed by a whisper, quiet, unmistakable. I never stopped. The credits roll. Names fade in. But the weight of the story lingers. Because this wasn't fiction. This was the truth. And it's still happening. Somewhere right now.